Good morning, student. Today we learn about the tsunami. Now, as we all know, tsunami is a natural calamity that happens in coastal areas which are near water bodies, big water bodies. So, today we are going to read some stories about a tsunami that occurred in 2004 and it affected India as well, and mostly the coastal part of India, which is the islands and the coastal part of India around the Bay of Bengal, and mostly the southern part of India. So let's find out which area was affected and why. So this is the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. It is in the Bay of Bengal, and these are a group of islands. And this is a enlarged map. So there are various small islands, and a group of all these islands is called an archipelago. Okay, so they're an archipelago. Then what happened is that there was an earthquake in Thailand, near Thailand, under the waters of Sumatra, and that earthquake led to the waves coming out at a very high speed, at a very high height, and that is what is called a tsunami. So let's see a video first, what a tsunami is like.
In 479 BC, when Persian soldiers besieged the Greek city of Potidaea, the tide retreated much farther than usual, leaving a convenient invasion route. But this wasn't a stroke of luck. Before they had crossed halfway, the water returned in a wave higher than anyone had ever seen, drowning the attackers. The Potidaeans believed they had been saved by the wrath of Poseidon. But what really saved them was likely the same phenomenon that has destroyed countless others, a tsunami. So
now in this video we'll see what is a tsunami and explanation.
Tsunamis are commonly known as tidal waves. They're actually unrelated to the tidal activity caused by the gravity.
So usual waves in the ocean that we see are because of the magnetic pull of or the gravitational pull of the sun and the moon. But this tsunami is not because of that.
Gravitational forces of the sun and moon. In many ways, tsunamis are just larger versions of regular waves. They have a trough and a crest, and consist not of moving water, but the movement of energy through water. The difference is in where this energy comes from. For normal ocean waves, it comes from wind. Because this only affects the surface, the waves are limited in size and speed. But tsunamis are caused by energy originating underwater, from a volcanic eruption, a submarine landslide, or most commonly, an earthquake on the ocean floor, caused when the tectonic plates of the Earth's surface slip, releasing a massive amount of energy into the water. This energy travels up to the surface, displacing water and raising it above the normal sea level. But gravity pulls it back down, which makes the energy ripple outwards horizontally. Thus, the tsunami is born, moving at over 500 miles per hour. When it's far from shore, a tsunami can be barely detectable, since it moves through the entire depth of the water. But when it reaches shallow water, something called wave shoaling occurs. Because there is less water to move through, this still massive amount of energy is compressed. The wave's speed slows down while its height rises to as much as 100 feet. The word tsunami, Japanese for harbor wave, comes from the fact that it only seems to appear near the coast. If the trough of a tsunami reaches shore first, the water will withdraw farther than normal before the wave hits, which can be misleadingly dangerous. A tsunami will not only drown people near the coast, but level buildings and trees for a mile inland or more, especially in low-lying areas. As if that weren't enough, the water then retreats, dragging with it the newly created debris and anything or anyone unfortunate enough to be caught in its path. The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami was one of the deadliest natural disasters in history, killing over 200,000 people throughout South Asia. So how can we protect ourselves against this destructive?
So as we saw what tsunami is, now I hope you have understood what tsunami is. It is a wave which is a very high wave, which is all full of energy because of the energy transferred from underneath the ocean bed because of maybe a volcanic eruption or a landslide or an earthquake. So the tsunami that we're going to talk about, the 2004 Indian tsunami, occurred because of an earthquake. Now I will show you some pictures. See, this is where the earthquake happened, and this energy was released, and this is what went through the water. So Andaman Nicobar Islands are somewhere here, and that is why they were the most impacted. And places like Tamil Nadu, these places were also the most impacted. So surrounding areas around this were the most impacted. So imagine this energy also reached this shore. So this is a very large distance to cover, but it shows the amount of energy, the sheer amount of energy that was released because of that earthquake or the collision of tectonic plates. Now, this was the aftermath of the tsunami, and this is just a measure to show how big the tsunami waves can be. This is if this is the height of a normal human being, and now this will be the height of the tsunami. This is again the aftermath. Even big, very solid things can also fall into this path, and they can also be toppled and destroyed. Whole towns get destroyed. This was just a brief view of how destructive tsunamis can be. So we're not going to read the whole thing as we've done that in the live class. So I'm just going to tell you, in the first part we have stories. We have stories of number one, Ignatius. And Ignatius was a manager, and his wife woke him up. But then they went out, and two of his children went with his Nanaji and his mama, maternal uncle, and maternal uncles. So they were not found, but the children who went with Ignatius were saved. Then we have another story of Sanjeev, who was a policeman, and he had saved everybody in his family, but then he jumped into water to save or to rescue the guest house wife's the guest house cook's wife, who was John's wife, but unfortunately he could not save her, and he also was taken and swept away in that tsunami. Then we have story of Meghna, who was floating on a wooden door for about 2 days before a wave dashed her and left her on the shore, and she was saved that way. And we have the story of Almas Javed, who was a 10-year-old student, and when they tried to rush out of the house because they felt the tremors, the grandfather hit something on his head, and the father went back to save him. As he went back to save him, then the wave came instantly and they swept him. The father and the grandfather, both of them, were swept away. His mothers and aunts, who were holding on to a tree, were washed away as well because the wave took the whole tree with them. And he saw Almas saw a log of wood, and she just climbed onto it. And then the next thing she knows is that she woke up in a hospital. So those were the stories, 4 5 stories from India, what happened on Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Then in part 2 we have a story of a British girl who was enjoying her holiday in Thailand and was saved only because of her geography lesson, because she paid attention in a geography lesson, and she had just learnt about tsunami 2 weeks back before coming to Thailand. And as soon as she saw what was happening, she immediately alerted her family members, and she was shouting hysterically, like crazy, like a mad woman. She was shouting that we have to go from here. So because of that, her family took her away into the hotel, and that hotel fortunately was able to hold its ground for 3 waves that had come their way, and they were eventually saved. And the other tourists who had gone back home with her also were saved, but then they later talked to the other tourists who were there with them, but not all of them could be saved. Then at the end, in part 3, we have the story of how animals have a better understanding or can sense these natural calamities before they occur, and they immediately rush to safe areas, rush to shelter, rush to areas where they won't be harmed, and that is why they have less casualties than humans in such calamities. So we have stories of dogs refusing to go on walks. We have stories of elephants who are running away from the beach. We have stories of elephants who are going on higher grounds. We have stories of animals in the zoos who are refusing to come out and they're just inside the shelter. We have stories of animals in national parks where 60 tourists had gone to see animals in the national park, and all 60 of them died. But unfortunately, all of them died. But no animals died in that, because animals already had that sense that something bad is going to happen. They were already hiding, they were already at a safe place. So this shows us how animals are better at identifying such uh, incidents beforehand, before they take place. And that is what is there was that was there in part 3. In part 1, again we have stories from India, from the Andaman and Nicobar island, when that calamity took place, so that we get to know what actually happens to people like us in such calamities. And it's not just happening to any random people. There are actual stories with actual people who have families with them, and they have to go through this ordeal in their lifetime. They have to lose their family members, they have to try to save other people, and in that they can lose their lives as well. So then in the next video we will discuss these questions, very simple questions, in comprehension check. I hope all of you have already done this, because we have discussed the whole chapter thoroughly in the class. So next video, if you have done these questions, just cross check the answers.